Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully you can see myself and Mandy now. My name is McFarland and I'm the feed additive product manager for Lallemand Animal Nutrition in the UK and Ireland. Welcome to our webinar, which is dedicated to the topic of sow colostrum quality. Today I'm joined by Mandy Nevel from AHDB. Hi Mandy.
Good morning everybody.
Mandy has worked in the pig industry for more than 30 years. She's a veterinary surgeon with expertise in vaccine development and pig infectious diseases. And it's this expertise which has led her to her current role within AHDB as Head of Animal Health and Welfare. Now, just for some housekeeping before Mandy starts her presentation, for the benefit of everyone's listening quality, your mics have all been placed on mute. If you have any questions for Mandy or myself, please type them in the dedicated section of the webinar software, which is at the top right of your screens. And we should have about 20 minutes at the end to answer all your questions. So today, Mandy's going to be talking about the importance of colostrum and explaining good practice, after which I'll be presenting some colostrum data that Lallemand has gathered, as well as introducing our colostrum scorecard, which you can find in the handout section of this webinar. So I'm now going to pass you over to Mandy.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak this morning. I'm really delighted to be talking about colostrum. I think it is probably the most important thing that we can do for our animals, which is to ensure that all our newborn animals have adequate colostrum. The outline of the talk this morning will be to run through the general importance of colostrum, why it's important, and then move on to the 3 Qs, which are the quantity of colostrum, the quality of it, and how quickly the animals need to get it. I'll talk a little bit about good practice and management around colostrum, move on to how we can manage colostrum with split suckling or fostering, talk about what happens when animals don't get enough colostrum, and then just briefly touch on some differences between indoor and outdoor colostrum management. By the end of the talk, there will be a lot of questions that I hope you'll be able to answer. I'm not going to run through all those now, but it's very much around the outline of the talk. But I think the one thing that I really want people today to take home is the message that colostrum, it is the #1 thing that you can do to protect the health and welfare of your pigs, that it has short-term and long-term effects, but really colostrum is the start in life they need. And at AHDB, we have a campaign each year called Colostrum is Gold, which outlines the importance of colostrum and the start in life that it can give to newborn animals. So what is colostrum and why is it important? Colostrum is gold, not only because it is so valuable to the animals, but because it is gold in colour. It's a lot thicker and creamier than mature milk, as you can see in the picture on the right. And it really has 2 main functions that I'm going to talk about today. That is energy and immunity. And we do call it liquid gold because it really is that valuable to our animals. If we start with energy and the function of colostrum as energy, colostrum's higher in energy than normal sow milk. And that's really important for the newborn animal. Newborn pigs have only enough energy to maintain their body temperature for a matter of minutes, really, up to 30 minutes before they go into a negative energy balance and start to become hypothermic. If a pig does start to lose heat and become hypothermic, it's an uphill struggle for that pig for the rest of its early life. So really important that animals can get that shot of energy within the first few minutes of life. The second point is around immunity. So colostrum is full of antibodies, which is how newborn pigs get their immunity and how they don't succumb to diseases in the early life. Newborn pigs obtain more than 95% of their immunity from colostrum, which is why it's so important. If we compare that with newborn humans, where antibodies will actually cross the placenta when the human is inside the mum's tum, and they get 95% of their antibodies across the placenta, which means that with humans, we can raise newborn babies quite happily on artificial milk without colostrum. But for newborn pigs and for other livestock, where they obtain their antibodies via the colostrum, that's just not possible. And without colostrum, those animals have a much, much higher chance of dying or coming to disease. So when a pig first drinks, the antibodies will enter into the stomach, which is this J-shaped structure at the top of the picture, and then they will be absorbed across the gut or the intestine. Now, when a newborn pig, or when a pig is first born, the gut is quite what we call leaky. There are gaps within the gut that allow large molecules such as those antibodies to pass directly into the bloodstream. What you probably can't see in the diagram on the left are the very fine network of blood vessels that overlie the intestines and the gut. So I've drawn a red squiggly line on the diagram just to the right there to indicate that blood vessel. But in the early life, probably, well, certainly within the first 24 hours, the gut remains leaky and can absorb some of those antibodies, and they can then pass directly into the bloodstream and travel around the pig's body. Now, that leaky gut, as I say, lasts for up to 24 hours, but it does start closing quite rapidly after about 6 hours. So it's really important that the colostrum that animals get is within the first 6 hours of life, and they need a good lot of it in that first 6 hours. Antibodies are in high concentration in colostrum, and it's really important that they get there before the gut closes, because the gut is, as I said, is leaky, but it's not just leaky to antibodies. If you get bacteria or viruses in there, they can also pass directly in there. And if the bacteria get in before the antibodies, then you will get disease. So in that very early period, it's really important that the colostrum and the antibodies get in there before the bad bacteria have a chance to do that. So some of the questions that I kind of pose at this point is, you know, when we think about newborn pigs that die, how many of them do we think have not had a feed? And it's estimated that about a third of them, so about 30% of newborn dead pigs, have not actually had a feed. And so they will probably have been hypothermic. They will have lost weight. If you look at the pig here on the right, which I've shown before, you can see it's born wet, and it's born, it's very small, so it has a large surface area to body mass ratio, which means that heat leaves that pig very quickly. So it's a great mechanism for getting the pigs hypothermic. And this can happen, as I say, within minutes, particularly if the pig's been born not very rapidly. It can have lost a lot of energy during the farrowing process. So really important that this pig gets its feed really, really quickly, and certainly within 30 minutes. And it can be the little things that we do on a farm, like just moving that pig closer to mum, drying it a bit, making sure it's come into a warm environment, that can make the big difference between it becoming hypothermic and not, and you giving it the best start in life. But also think about the flooring. How easy is it for pigs to get to that first feed? Is the flooring too slippery when it's wet? But also, if you're an outdoor producer, thinking about bedding up, and you may not be doing too many favours if you put a whole load of straw in right before the sow farrows, because what you're doing is effectively building an obstacle course for those little pigs to get through once they've been born to mum. So it's important that the straw has a chance to bed down in those outdoor arks. So think about how far the pigs are walking, and how much you can do to help them get to mum really quickly. So if we move on to the 3 Qs, and those are the quality of the colostrum, the quantity of the colostrum, and how quickly the pigs get it. So if we start with quality, The level of antibodies in colostrum is affected by a number of things, primarily the age of the sow, and we know that as sows get older, they will have been exposed to more pathogens on the farm. They will have their own immunity built up over months and years, and so older sows do tend to have higher levels of antibodies. So if you have a herd that has a large population of parity 1 sows, your herd immunity might not be quite as good as a more stable, slightly older herd, and that can have a big impact on quality of colostrum. So how does a sow get her immunity? Well, it will be through pathogens and diseases on farm that she's come into contact with in her life. It will also be what she's vaccinated against, but also her nutrition, making sure that she's got all the elements that she needs to develop a really good immune system. And another important fact is the stress, to make sure she's as stress-free as possible. So it can be quite difficult to know when a piglet's had enough milk. It's not like in ruminants where we see milk production in sows. It can be quite difficult to see that in sows. But what we do know is that milk letdown happens probably once every half hour, but only for a short period of time. So the sow isn't constantly milking. She will let milk down at certain times. And I think really important is the litter size and the teat numbers that she's got. And with these large litter sizes that we have now, that can be a real issue, that we haven't got enough teats for each of the pigs in the litter. So that is really important. But within the first 30 minutes after birth, the pigs certainly need some colostrum for energy, and within the first 6 hours of life for that immunity, so for those antibodies to be absorbed across the gut. Pigs tend to have little and often, say every 30 minutes. And so, if you are having to tube feed or something like that, or supplement the pigs, it's important to do it little and often as they would get in nature. And remember about gut closure, I've said that it happens from about 6 hours and is complete by about 24 hours after life. And it is gradual, it's not an all or none phenomenon, but it's actually stimulated to close once the first feed has been had. So if you have a pig that's had a small first feed and then nothing for a few hours, that is going to compromise the amount of immunity that pig gets. What do we mean by good practice? Well, I think a lot of what can be done is in the preparation of the sow. So making sure that she's in a good state of nutrition, that her vaccines are up to date, that you've got a good herd structure. That's not something that can happen overnight. That takes quite a long time to achieve on your farm, and it's a continuous process. But then as she gets closer to farrowing, it's the preparation of the accommodation, making sure she's as comfortable as she can be, that she's as stress-free as she can be. And again, paying attention to detail, so making sure that she's got good access to food, ad-lib water. And again, as I say, it is that attention to detail. And then the care at farrowing, so thinking about the creep area, the temperature, and obviously your observation. And if you're farrowing outdoors, again, you can do all of this, making sure that you're paying attention to the farrowing arc where she is, bedding up in good time so that she can build a nest and make sure it's flat and not an obstacle course for those pigs. And the hygiene of everything that you do is really important. Remember, when the newborn pig's born, it has virtually no immunity whatsoever. So ensuring that the accommodation and the sow herself and the piglets and equipment that you use is really clean will prevent any harmful bacteria getting into the pigs before they've had a chance to have a suck and get that colostrum. So really important. With split suckling, the important thing is that all pigs is that they get the 3 Qs, that they get colostrum quickly, they get it in sufficient quantity, and it's of sufficient quality. And as with everything, small pigs are at a disadvantage. but it is that attention to detail and just making those little changes that you can do and taking that extra care. It's not wasted. It really does pay dividends if you can pay attention to detail. If you need to split suckle, split the litter into 2 groups and always feed the smaller pigs first. Make sure that the pigs that are not feeding are warm and dry, somewhere safe, and we recommend that you swap those pigs after about 60 to 90 minutes, by which time they will have 2 or 3 feeds. Again, you may need to assist weak pigs to the teat, and you can consider hand or tube feeding. Those newborn pigs, the stomachs are actually really small, and it wouldn't take a lot to strip out a little bit of milk from a sow and to hand feed or to tube feed. And if you're doing that, I know Mark's going to talk about the Brax refractometer and measuring the quality of your colostrum, and that would be a good point at which to do it. If you are going to split suckle, you can do it for up to 3 days, and obviously don't do it at night when the gap between feeds would be way too long for newborn pigs. I was hoping to show a video, but technology hasn't allowed that. But I would like to point you in the direction of some videos that we've got on our AHDB website. They're only a few minutes long each, but they talk about colostrum management, they talk about split suckling, and they talk about fostering and colostrum management. And they're well worth a look if you want to follow that up in a bit more detail. So how do we know if we've managed our colostrum correctly or whether we've got poor signs of colostrum? And I'd be interested to know how many of you think that you've got good colostrum management, or you've got an issue. But if you have poor colostrum management, the most likely thing you're going to see is an increased pre-weaning mortality. And I wonder how many people with an increased pre-weaning mortality immediately think of colostrum, but I think that's what it should be. It should be top of your list if you've got increased pre-weaning mortality. But that it can be an issue after the neonatal period. So colostrum has an impact on the longer term life of the pig. So even if you've got problems in the post-weaning period, it's worth considering your colostrum management and whether that's having an impact on those problems that you're seeing. So we said that 30% of pigs that die in the first sort of day of life have no evidence of milk in the stomach, but it's likely that another 30% have not had it quickly enough. So even if you open up a dead pig and you see that there's milk in the stomach, it's always good to just think about, well, did this pig have it quickly enough, and was it of sufficient quality? And it's likely that another 30% have probably just not had sufficient. And what you're likely to see there again is increased mortality and poor growth rate. But you may also see disease later in life, even in the post-weaning period. So I just want to mention a little bit about the longer term effects and how colostrum can affect that. So this is a graph which shows the time from birth on the bottom axis, so from the left where it's got minutes, across hours, days, and then weeks. And the level of protection that the newborn pig will have is from colostrum is what we call the innate immunity. And so you can see in the period from when the pig's born to the time that the colostral antibodies are absorbed into the gut there's a window there, and you may have a physical barrier to getting bacteria in. But actually that period there is a real opportunity for bacteria to get in before the colostrum has been taken in. And if you get that, you're likely to suffer with disease and high mortality. So the antibodies that the pig absorbs in the first day of life will reach a peak, and then they'll gradually decline over the subsequent days and weeks. And they kind of plateau off after a number of weeks. But as the pigs come into contact with other bacteria and pathogens from their mum or from their environment, they get what's called acquired immunity, which is where they start to develop antibodies of themselves. But that doesn't happen for quite a period of time. And so as you get the decline in the colostrum antibodies, and before you've got a really good acquired immunity, you've got that crossing over of the two where we've marked that as the danger point. and actually that quite often coincides with the period of weaning. So you're weaning pigs at a time where their immunity is really quite low, the lowest point it's been since they were actually born. So it really is a critical time for those pigs. But if you can get that level of protection higher by more colostrum or good quality colostrum, you can actually shift that danger point up so that when you're weaning your pigs, they're in a much better position from an immunological point of view, and they're less likely to succumb to post-weaning diarrhea or post-weaning pneumonia. So really, really important, not just for the short term, but also for the longer term effect. The difference between indoor and outdoor isn't probably as great as you think. So all that sow preparation and the preparation of the farrowing area, you can do that both indoor and outdoor. I think really the difference where you have more difficulty on an outdoor unit is in the first day and that repeated observation. You can't just keep going in and moving pigs closer to mum to help them. But there's still an awful lot that you can do. So your sow preparation is so important, and the farrowing area preparation really important. But think about what you can do in the first week and after the first week of life. So ensuring that colostrum is there for all the pigs, whether they're indoor or outdoor. So just to conclude, colostrum is gold. It's gold in its value and it's gold in its quality. And you don't need a huge amount to get into the pigs, but you do need it of high quality and you need it quickly. And attention to detail makes a really big difference. And just those little touches of moving pigs closer to mum, making sure mum's comfortable, can make a really big difference and have a big impact on post and pre-weaning mortality. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mandy. Lots of useful information in there. That's great. If you have any questions for Mandy based on our presentation, please pop them in the question section now, and we'll get them to, in probably about 15 minutes. I've just got a few slides to go through. So really just a few slides to start to recap on colostrum and colostrum's importance as outlined by Mandy. These graphs are based on historic work comparing colostrum and milk composition. They tell us what we all know to be true. So colostrum has a lower water content than sow milk, hence it's visibly thicker, and also that it's packed full of antibodies, which are proteins, hence the large difference in nitrogenous material content. So it's 13.8% for colostrum versus milk at 5.8%. So Mandy has talked about the importance of nutrition and immunity when it comes to colostrum for piglets. The only other point I'd like to add, which is really linked to nutrition, is that colostrum provides maturation. So piglets are born with a very specific immature gastrointestinal tract, which is low protease activities, fast passage rate, and low acid production capacity. So another great reason why this nutrient-dense first feed is so important for the piglet to have. As a company, Lallemand has been looking at colostrum quality in sows for quite some time now. The above work was done in 2010 in conjunction with two well-known scientists from INRA at the time. 67 sows were followed for 11 days of farrowing, 24 hours a day, and sampled for colostrum at 3-hour intervals for 24 hours post-farrowing. On the left, you can see the biochemistry results for the milk samples, the green bars from the study. They're very similar to the published book values for sow milk colostrum, or sow milk composition, so the yellow bars. Whereas on the right, you have the colostrum results, which show a much bigger variation compared to the literature. We know that colostrum composition varies pig to pig and farm to farm, and this was really our first-hand experience back in 2010 of that variation. Mandy has done a great job of explaining the importance of antibodies in colostrum, and in this study, all 3 individual immunoglobulins, IgM, IgA, and IgG, were measured and benchmarked against the literature. The variation in colostrum composition from the previous slides were also found to be true at the antibody level. Here is the result for the IgM concentration evolution over the 24-hour sampling period versus the literature. We can see differences from our study results, the green line, versus the literature, which is the dotted line. Here is the result for the IgA concentration evolution, and again, we can see some differences versus the literature. And then finally, here is the result of the IgG concentration evolution, which actually shows the biggest variation of all the antibodies from the literature values. So with our study values in green being continuously higher. When it comes to the effective parity, this time our study confirmed the literature with multiparas sows, so the line in dark blue, having higher IgG content than primiparas sows. And this might be one possible explanation why primiparas litters seem to have a higher susceptibility to diarrhea. So if we're thinking about better colostrum management on farms and all of Mandy's recommendations, then primiparas sows could be the first priority on most farms. Now, as part of this original research, the effect of a Lallemand probiotic strain was also evaluated. Sows were split into 2 groups, with a treatment group of 33 sows being fed the probiotic and no added supplementation given to a control group of 34 sows. The probiotic in question was a live yeast of the Piglets variety and was delivered every day in the 3 weeks prior to farrowing. As you can see from the graphs, it showed a benefit in all Ig types across all sampling time points, and in particular IgG on the top left. This final graph from the study compares the protein content of the treatment and control groups. Now, antibodies are proteins after all, so it's not surprising that we see a higher protein content for the colostrum from sows fed the probiotic. And if we think of it in terms of protein, it's a useful way to explain how the increase in antibody content may come about. The Piglets strain is a well-documented gut modifier. It increases the efficiency of the sow's physiological processes, particularly digestion in the lower gut. In sows, antibodies are filtered from the bloodstream 3 weeks before farrowing and are stored in the mammary gland. So we can hypothesize that the efficiency of this process could be being improved in conjunction with other physiological improvements with the live yeast. So we also know from specific trials that Piglets has an effect on the pig's immune system. So this may also be a pathway for this increased IgG content. So how can we measure colostrum quality in farms and demonstrate improvements from some of the suggested management changes Mandy has outlined, or from dietary changes such as supplementing probiotics? Well, the Brix refractometer, as Mandy has already mentioned, is a reliable, sort of cheap and fast means to estimate IgG concentration in colostrum. The paper referenced here from the University of Helsinki has validated that reliability. And if you look at the table on the right, you can see that low levels of IgG were recorded for colostrum samples with Brix readings below 20%. Borderline content had Brix readings of 20 to 24%. Adequate had Brix readings of 25 to 29%. And very good had Brix readings greater than 30%. In terms of testing colostrum quality using a Brix refractometer, we know commercial farms are busy places, and we aren't advocating that every batch of sows gets tested. However, it could be a very, very easy way to troubleshoot an issue, as Mandy has maybe discussed, as with pre or post-wean piglets that might actually be linked back to colostrum quality. So there's a really good video on the AHDB YouTube channel in relation to measuring cows' colostrum. that talks you through exactly how to use a Brix refractometer. So if you're interested and think that the refractometer is something that you could use in farm, then I'd encourage you to watch the video, because it's a very clear demonstration of what to do with your colostrum sample and also how to calibrate the refractometer. We've also produced a handy colostrum quality scorecard based on the Helsinki University table, which explains the process of using the refractometer, as well as providing some top tips to improve colostrum quality. If anyone wants some of these in hard copy, then feel free to get in touch, but you can download a copy from the handout section of this webinar as well. So to wrap up, I've got a couple of more recent examples from my global colleagues who've been putting the Brix refractometers to good use. This work was done in 2017 and subsequently published in a 2019 Congress. It involved 4 farms in Colombia with 123 PIC sows sampled. The probiotic was supplemented 30 days before farrowing, so it's the same as the previous study. This time colostrum was collected just once per sow after the 10th piglet was delivered. And as you can see with the probiotic supplementation, we have a lower percentage of poor and borderline Brix readings and a higher percentage of adequate and very good. We've also used the Brix refractometer more recently in a 2019 field trial. These are the results from a 2000 sow unit in Germany. It's a commercial unit. 238 sows were included as part of the study. So we had 137 in the control group and 101 supplemented with the Bellardi variety of live yeast. Colostrum samples were taken from the sows within the first 3 hours of farrowing, the results of which you can see here on the left. But a second set of samples was also taken in the period post 3 hours of farrowing from the same sows, showing that the probiotic effect persisted with a much lower number of colostrum samples in the poor category in particular. This was very much a commercial farm study, and so what we lack in statistics here is made up with some nice performance feedback. So supplemented sows had piglets with a higher average birth weight that also grew more during their first day of life. They also had a plus 0.6 increase in piglet born alive rate and a reduction in the percentage of stillborn piglets, equating to 3.7%. So it was a nice commercial study using the refractometer. So that really concludes my slides. We're on good time for questions. My take-home messages are that colostrum provides nutrition, immunity, and maturation. Colostrum quality can be successfully measured at farm level, especially just to really troubleshoot a potential issue. And if we want to improve it, then we should look for ways to improve the sow's physiological status in the 3 weeks leading up to farrowing. My last point, which really relates to this sow physiological status, is to beware of possible heat stress in sows at this time of year. Not only could it negatively impact on the sow's colostrum quantity and quality in relation to, say, reduced feed intake or stress, but there's research in ruminants showing that the effects of heat stress in utero reduces newborn Ig absorption regardless of colostrum quality. So with this in mind, we'll be including a YouTube recording of last year's heat stress webinar that was also done in conjunction with AHDB in the follow-up email that you'll get with this webinar. So just to be mindful of heat stress with our sows at this time of year. So that's me. We're now ready for questions. And we've got 4 in already, which is great. So we've got a very specific question to start off. I'm going to direct this one at you, Mandy. Does research prove the benefits of powder drying of the newborn piglets? Mandy.
Well, I think if you can dry the piglets quicker, that will certainly benefit them from a heat exchange point of view, because we know that wet piglets will dissipate heat more quickly with latent heat of evaporation. So drying piglets, I'm not aware of any specific stuff on powder.
Okay. Hi Mandy, very interesting presentation. If you are tube feeding, how much should you feed at once? Typically for a piglet less than 0.8 kilos for tube feeding.
Well, when you read the textbooks, they will tell you sort of probably 10% of body weight in the first 6 hours, but ideally, when you think about what the pig would get naturally, it would be in very small meals, and you'll be doing well to milk out more than a few mils from a sow. But even those few mils that you can give a sow, so 5 mils in that very first feed for a small piglet will actually make a huge difference. I would probably err on the side of caution. They talk about sort of 10% body weight in the first 24 hours. So, you know, a kilo pig, you're looking at 100 mils, but that would probably be in at least 10, probably even 20 feeds.
Wow.
So that's, you know, so you're looking at little and often. And if you think about the size of a newborn pig's stomach, what you don't want to do is to push too much in there, because that can cause problems. So I'd err on the side of caution.
Thanks, Mandy. Another question here, Mandy, would you recommend getting the farm vet to PM post-mortem these young piglets to see percentage of dead piglets that have not had their first feed of colostrum? Is that something you can do on a commercial farm setting post-mortem?
Yeah, I think it's a really good thing to do. You know, you can keep your pigs. The best thing to do is if you've got some dead pigs, put them in the fridge. I wouldn't recommend freezing them, because if you want to do any further analysis as a vet, you want to do any pathology on them, if you freeze them, you ruin the tissue structure under a microscope. So I would recommend putting them, you know, double wrapping them in a bag, putting them in the fridge for a few days till you've got a few, and then you could either take them to your vet if you've got that set up, or get the vet to come and have a look at them. But absolutely, you know, if you don't know why your pigs are dying, how are you going to correct it? So I think understanding why your pigs are dying, understanding whether they've been fed or not, and also you could combine that with looking at your colostrum quality.
Excellent. I've got another question here. With the increase in litter sizes, so again, it's quite topical related to hyperprolificity, can colostrum production be improved through nutrition?
Well, I think all the principles are the same for hyperprolific sows. So good nutrition, adequate water will ensure that there's enough colostrum there. I think with large litter sizes, it is that problem of every pig getting adequate access to a teat that can be the problem. But absolutely, good nutrition of the sows is fundamental.
Yeah, and getting them on the right plane and getting the feed intakes there. Very good question here is the use of oxytocin before farrowing influencing colostrum intake? That's a great question from Cindy.
It shouldn't influence intake. Oxytocin will influence colostrum letdown, because it does that, but it's quite short-lived. So if you want to, you know, for example, if you were wanting to collect some colostrum, you would have to give the oxytocin and then strip the sow out with the colostrum within minutes. It doesn't last very long. It's kind of pulsatile. So, but would it affect the sow, the piglets intake?
Piglets.
The piglets intake. I take it you're talking about injecting the sow.
Yeah, I think that's the case, but perhaps that person is thinking about, you know, the overall production of colostrum. Is there any detrimental effect, I guess, after, in terms of, are you losing something by introducing oxytocin to the sow for the piglets?
It shouldn't do, because It shouldn't do because it is short-lived.
Yes. Just on that question from me, more than anything else, oxytocin is obviously used on farms, but do you have a personal opinion on how it should be used, or when you would like it to be used, or when you don't wish for it to be used, based on your experience?
I think it should be used with care.
Yeah.
It's a very, very powerful
Powerful.
powerful drug, and needs to be used under veterinary guidance. So depending on your vet, and again, I would use little and more frequent than big doses.
Mm-hmm. That's great. We've got a couple of more commercial questions. So your trial protocols, this is one for me, your trial protocols indicate 21 to 30 day pre-farrowing feeding of Pillardi, but will dosing only the lactation diet, i.e. fed from 5 to 7 days pre-farrowing, be of any value or regarding colostrum improvement? So we have, I think ideally, our ideal scenario is what we put in our protocols based on the fact that we know that colostrum is formed, or sorry, antibodies are formed within the pig's colostrum in those 30 days leading up to the farrowing. But yes, we have people who will use the product in the days close up, and what they tend to do is to actually increase the dose rate, and the feedback is they see a benefit there. But no specific data in relation to actually that with colostrum quality. Anything we've done with the product has always been dosing for those sort of 3 weeks minimum prior to farrowing. So that's the answer for that one. So we've, I think that's the last of our questions at the minute. I don't know if anyone's got any more. We've answered pretty much everyone's. And there's one more commercial one that maybe I'll just take offline. It's a bit product specific, but hopefully I think we've got through everyone's in a timely fashion. I don't want to keep anyone longer. If we've got our slides done and if we've got our question answered, then I'm keen to wrap up. So I just want to thank everyone for attending the webinar this morning, and on behalf of Lallemand and myself. And I would also like to thank you, Mandy, our presenter, and AHDB for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
Nope, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you. And okay, that's pretty much us. So hopefully have a great day, and hopefully it's been a good start to your day. And goodbye, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.